This is my time now. Thank you. Mr. Cummings was attempting to interrupt. Let me say this first before I ask you both questions. I know that neither of you have any direct personal knowledge of whether the President of the United States had lunch yesterday. And Mr. Cummings can ask you whether or not the President of the United States had lunch, and neither of you will have personal information. It doesn't mean he didn't have lunch. It means you don't know. And we knew that already when you were here. So asking questions that we know you're not here to prove or have information about really is irrelevant to our discussion. But I want to ask both of you about what we've heard so far in this testimony previously. I want to thank both of you, because you're coming forward and being honest, because there are those who not only want to stick their heads in the sand, but who don't want us to find out the answers. So both of you are standing here telling the truth and honestly telling us what happened, and that one of those truths is that this was not just directed out of Ohio. Now, Ms. Hoffaker, I'm from Dayton, Ohio, just a few miles from you, so I was kind of personally offended when it was placed as a label as a bunch of rogue employees in Cincinnati, because what we now know from you and Mr. Hull definitively under oath is that that was not true. If we had stopped this investigation previously, we would just have the answers of the IRS that this was some rogue employees of Cincinnati. Ms. Hoffaker, how did you feel when they said that, when you knew that that was not the case, that it was just rogue agents down in Cincinnati?
Sir, I was deeply offended. I mean, it impugned my reputation and the reputation of other agents and basically all federal employees.
Mr. Hull, you've had a great career, dedicated to what we know is one where we have to have people who execute things honestly and with detail. You've dedicated yourself to the principles of that. How did you feel when you heard that they were saying it was just Cincinnati, when you knew that also was not the case from your involvement?
I didn't feel that I had anything to say, sir.
Well, I know it would seem to me that you would feel, as Ms. Hoffaker, that since you were dedicated to making certain that the truth occurred, that these things were executed, that it also violated your sense of really integrity. I want to ask both of you, have either of you been contacted by the Department of Justice or the FBI to be questioned about this matter, Ms. Hoffaker?
Yes, I have.
Who were you contacted by, Department of Justice or FBI?
I believe both.
Mr. Hull?
Yes, I was contacted by the Department of Justice.
I'm glad to hear that, because one of the questions that we have had from the very beginning is that this should not merely be an issue of the IRS, but through Lois Lerner issuing an apology, but that the American public should never be afraid of the investigative arms of their government being turned against them. And criminal laws should be enforced to ensure that that doesn't happen, and to the extent that there are not criminal laws, they should be enacted. I have a bill 1950 that would make this a specific crime. We certainly are hopeful that as the Department of Justice and the FBI looks into this, that they don't merely just stop and stick their heads in the sand, as some of those wish that we would do, but they would actively look at all the aspects of this to make certain that we can hold people accountable and make certain that this doesn't happen again. Mr. Hull, when you had said that this was different, that this was not what your experience had been before. You said, I can't recall that it ever happening, but it may have, that you'd been overturned or that things had this type of delay. Is there a process by which you could enter an inquiry as to this is unusual, that you might have been able to report to supervisors or record that this process was unusual and therefore, by you needed additional scrutiny?
I don't believe that was any part of my duties, sir.
Say that again?
This was not part of my duties to complain about what the review process should be.
Okay, so you would not then have a forum by which to say this is of a concern and have someone else review the fact that you were being reviewed?
As a tax law specialist, any suggestion that I had a determination on would go to a reviewer, and the reviewer would either agree with me or disagree with me, whereupon we would have a discussion about it. Further review is very, beyond that, is very rare, but it did happen in this particular case.
Thank you both for your honesty, Mr. Chairman.